Hello, I hear that we're live. This is so exciting. I'm gonna start in a little bit. Dale is with me, he's sharing his information. Amazing. There's a few of us that are here. So exciting. I'm Mel, UX career coach based in Barcelona, and we're gonna spend approximately half an hour here to talk about how best we can articulate UX value across organizations. I believe you can see my screen now, so that would be maybe a good sign to get from Dale that all is good. Yes, I hear that it is good. So, what brings me here? I have worked with over 200 people since I started my practice as a UX career coach upon doing UX research as a staff UX researcher, UX research manager. And a lot of what I hear is about articulating the value of what we do. Very few people struggle with the technicalities of what needs to be done, even if we need to adjust our work with changes in the processes we use, the AI or what have you. It's really about how can we communicate with the business stakeholders, C levels, or other people whose buy-in we need in a way that will help them not only understand the work that we do as UXers, but also act on it accordingly. So that's a challenge, and it is a challenge with multiple dimensions. So I'm here because I spend every single day on this challenge with my clients, and I would like to share with you the key insights. And I hope that you'll walk away from this session feeling empowered, having more tools in your toolbox. And I also have a cheat sheet for people that might want to reach out to me on DM. I can freely share that with you. So it's a little bit what we are up to. The agenda will start by us setting the context. Context really matters. If we don't know why we are where we are, it's really hard to figure out what to experiment with as we go towards the change. Building trust, building executive trust. I put executive here because I wanted us to think of our business stakeholders, people that focus on not just the product or UX in particular, but all other dimensions of how the money flows and how the organizations that we are in might be profitable. So how can we gain trust with them? How can we understand them? And then there's the wrap up and the next steps. I do mastery classes on this, so it's normally for 3 hours, but this is going to be a challenge of how to make it much shorter. So about the context, first is really about recognizing that there is that gap. Most UXers I know, of course there will be exceptions, are really moved by improving users' lives. Whether you're in content or you're in design or you're in research or what have you, you really are moved by wanting to understand users' needs and delivering solutions to that. But that's not really necessarily the language that business leaders use. Maybe they think of conversion and retention and profitability and managing shareholders and whatnot. So there is that gap. First, acknowledge it, and it's nothing pessimistic. It's more rather understanding that, hey, we might want to figure out how to bridge that gap. How do you communicate the UX value? I focus a lot on that because you need to start from yourself as the most important tool you're using. And if you're aware of your tendencies, if you're aware of what you lean on in your communication with your stakeholders, it'll help you greatly. And the third bit is about performing trust building in your organization because, we talk about being data driven, we talk about the rigor of our work, but if the trust isn't there, you can have the most rigorous work, whether you're a designer, researcher, or whichever niche that you have, it's just not going to work. So, what can we do so that the work that we do marries with trust building and so that our work is acted upon? So I always ask in a session here, I don't know if I have access to the chat with others, but if there is, I know there's studio chat, so feel free to share some of the frictions. But a lot of the times I hear from my clients like, hey, there is just with non-design stakeholders, we just use a different language. I talk about the users, I talk about how to make them have more seamless experiences, how to have joy for them, how to, remove frictions. And yet a lot of the times business stakeholders operate a little differently, and this can indeed cause friction. If there is some examples in the chat, I want to hear that. But really it starts from there, and I do trust that you sense that friction. Yeah, I'll see the chat at the end, but yeah, it's good to know. I'm gonna maybe leave it shorter so that we can have that conversation. But my take is that you're here in this conversation because you notice that gap, you notice that non-design stakeholders, and I don't talk about the UX director in your organization, but whoever that they report to that is not a UXer, they have a different mindset, they have different things that move them, right? So there could be that friction point about what matters. And there is that disconnect. And while many things can be said on this disconnect, my experience together with my full-time jobs and startups, corporate, and anything in between, big and small, it tends to come from this sort of clash that happens when the primary thing that moves people for UXers is usually user needs, and for the stakeholders that we work with, it's the business viability. And it's not like one part is right and the other isn't it's because you need both. You need the business to be viable to continue serving the users, and the user needs, if they're met, like, business cannot be viable, and like there's no point in that. So it's like, it's not choosing one or the other, but it's recognizing that business viability and user needs and the language that makes sense for each don't necessarily click on its own if different disciplines don't know how to communicate in different contexts. So it's just us recognizing that. So in my practice, and I'm talking about hundreds of hours of one-to-one chats, trainings, and many other bits, this is the kind of thing that came in my sessions where non-UX stakeholders that we work with, they have a language that focuses on the risk and the reward. They talk in terms of the revenue. They think in terms of the risks for the business viability. They think of the impact that any change that will bring, not just for the users, but for the organization itself, and they look into the company goals, right? Efficiency always mattered, but it matters even more in an age of AI where it really became efficient. And I don't want to call it fear, but there's deep concern that the competitors will beat us in many organizations, of course, depending on the sector. So it's about the competitive edge too. A lot of non-UX stakeholders we work with wake up and they wonder what the competitors have done and what the results are going to be. And they also wonder too if the key leaders, maybe that's the C-level or maybe that's shareholders, how are they supporting their initiatives? So none of it is about users directly itself, and I figured that would be important for us UXers focusing on the user needs and wants to also pay attention to this language here and what are the key concerns and the things that people care about. So what does it mean? How do you communicate UX value? So far, we come from different backgrounds, UX, and this is the reason why I'm so proud of being part of this community as well. We come from journalism, we come from different social sciences, we come from arts and humanities, so we're all from a different background, but it's important, together with your background and your place of work, to know a little bit your own style of communication. So we talked about what tends to be the kind of concepts regarding risk and rewards and competitors and so on for non-UXers, our stakeholders. And it's important for you to know that when you go to work, online, offline, hybrid, what have you, what kind of language you use, you speak with them. And this is a bit subconscious as well as conscious. I'll put myself on the spot and I tell you that during my full-time UX work, I was the kind of person that sounded more like the user needs person. I'm like, users are struggling with X. Like the copy that we are using on the checkout for confirming the payment is really frustrating them. They are confused. They're struggling. They don't understand when there's a payment error. I just felt like I lost sleep over it. And I felt like user needs needed to move what we needed to do, right? So that's the kind of UXer that I am. But there's others amongst us that really care about the process. They care about to speak in terms of the processes that are taking place. And there is also those that might be focusing more on the business impact, right? Talking most in particular like UX about a business function and how it can help drive retention, reduce support, customer service support calls, or anything like that. So maybe we're talking about the very same thing here, the thing that needs to be done for UXers by UXers for the organization, but how we argue for that act is going to be very different, and it's important that you know your style. So another example, like when you're feeling resistance towards change in the work that you do, some of us push back and we insist, we advocate passionately for user needs. There's also a lot of education for the stakeholders. I'm not sure how you feel about that word. Maybe towards the end we have a bit of chat and I hear your angle, but the evangelizing language is there too. And there's others that are more open to reframing, and they talk about UX in the way that it can impact business priorities. That's also something worth to mention. Like I said, I'm not here to say advocating passionately for user needs is right or wrong, because clearly if we don't do, no one else in the org is advocating for users like we do. That's important. Evangelizing is as well. But right, the context matters. When and how you do it, or how much you do it, will also matter. So let's start from self-awareness for that reason. So I said it already. It's a question of balance. If you, as a UXer, understand a little better your communication style, your strengths, your growth areas, then you can be a little more flexible in the way that you tell your story with the person that is in front of you that is a non-UXer, to get their buy-in a little more easier, because you then know what they care about and you can frame what you need to share in a way that will resonate with them. So some questions that I ask in my coaching sessions that might or might not apply in your case too, is that if you're moved by user needs, like you have deep empathy, this is why you do the work that you do, ask yourself, are you showing care for the business needs as you express deep empathy for users? Because sure, maybe it's going to be very bold. You care, you stand for users, but you're hired by the company and this is where your paycheck is coming from. So you need to care about the business viability within ethical terms, of course. So that's going to be important, right? So are you mindful as well how much UX process details you're sharing with non-UXers? Because we are deeply passionate to innovate in our field of work, but maybe others don't share that same level of passion for the process itself. Maybe they want to just get the outcome, and that's good enough, and process is something that you yourself care about it, but not everybody needs to be educated. So pay attention to how much education needs to take place. And the last bit I also like to ask is, are you advocating for users as you prioritize business metrics? Because if you're always talking in terms of metrics, maybe you're like a product manager. That's great, great opportunity for you, but also always worth asking, what's the implication for the users, and to be able to advocate them is also going to be key. So with that part, I'm going to go to the second half, and this is really about trust building. I call it performing trust building, because part of it is really something we need to learn, we need to practice. We might not to take it for granted, and a part of it is cognitive and part of it is emotional too, because never forget, you're a person working with other group of people working with people for other people. So never underestimate the importance of the human elements of it. And this is the part that I really like, because everything that we're set out to do is about our experience as UXers. We keep on learning, we keep on growing. We are always more and more data driven. That's great. The definition of what it takes to be competent changes, but we keep learning all those things. But pay attention to this when I say that with all of that, without relationship building, is really going to fall flat if your business counterparts think of you as a threat, if you're not building rapport with them. That's going to be quite hard for you. So this is a section about being able to back up your statements with data in a way that your stakeholders will care about. These are the things that matter to them, but you do so in a way that you build a relationship with them. So it's not, creating always like this pushback and challenges and negativity, but it's more as influencing, because you as a UXer don't have the authority to execute. So you need this buy-in from others. So I have some examples before we go to the final stage. We gave these examples before too in the earlier point about like which kind of communicator are you as a UXer, right? So if you're the user-centric one, you can be, by the way, but the important part is going to be about the ROI framing, so that people who might not be innately necessarily user-centric like you, they'll still find a reason to care, right? This is me, like me and Mel some years ago as a UX research professional talking like users struggle with checkout process. Like it's so complex, they abandon their carts, they don't understand what's happening, they don't get to pay. I care to solve that problem, but maybe a better ROI in this concrete example in a way that will build trust with our stakeholders is really about, sure, sharing that frustration of the users and talking about the importance of reducing that with a more smooth, faster checkout, but also, showing how this will help users complete their purchases, because this is at the end what the organization is seeking to do, right? Never underestimate that. The other part, if you're more inclined to be business centric, you talk in numbers, you start from the abandonment rate. Of course, this might or might not apply to your organization, but who wants a high cart abandonment rate here? No. But you talk about the friction that is taking place, you talk about the checkout flow, you discuss what's happening, but maybe there's a way to use a language in a way that is more actionable, right? Maybe you can talk about how optimizing the checkout will help reduce the abandonment, and this will have a result for a projected increase in the revenue, right? Because this is what everyone is moving towards. So if you can frame it with the ROI that is going to be clear based on what people can anticipate, then the business centricity that you're discussing will be relevant, will make sense for people. And the other bit that you can be thinking about is maybe you are thinking through what the competitors are doing, what they are delivering in terms of, in this example with the checkout. No, it's like it's more simplest, it's one click, and so on and so forth. And you talk about why this matters in the right context with the right people. Maybe the ROI framing they need is about like, hey, if we actually invest in our checkout, this will help us stay more competitive, strengthen the loyalty we get from our customers, and it'll have an impact on our long-term revenue growth. So really stating the facts, showing the data, but also using a language that matters to the other, to then help them understand why this matters in a way that they themselves care. So these are important things, and I will wrap up them right now briefly so that we can have the conversation, the short one. It's important even more so in the latest years, and I project that it'll continue to be important in the future years for UXers to serve as a business function. It does not mean that we no longer care about our users. Of course, we need to advocate for them. If they struggle, it's important to pay attention to. We need to work towards building delightful products. All those things matter, but it's important to understand how that translates to business viability, how that, if that overlaps with the business goals and business needs, to be able to formulate a language, a framing that makes sense for both angles, both for the business and for the users themselves. The second bit is there is going to be a way that you'll defend users' needs in a way that comes natural to you. Like I have a very clear notion of prioritizing the user's needs, their wants, if they have struggles, understanding their mental models. But it's important that we are a little more strategic in the way that we discuss it with our non-UX stakeholders, because they didn't choose the field that we chose. Maybe they don't have that innate interest in what's happening to the users the same way that we care. So that's the part where you can build trust by speaking their language, not yours, in a way that comes out in a raw way. And that can happen if you understand what they care about, what goals they move towards, what it is that they're afraid of, what their primary initiatives focus on. So if you can discuss what change you want to bring for the users in a way that your stakeholders will care, they'll be both important for the trust building and also to be able to act on the changes that you need. And the third bit that I say, and that goes with the cheat sheet as well, is about executing your personalized action plan, because you know where you are, the challenges you might or might not be facing with your stakeholders. And with the very brief conversation that we have today, maybe it's time for you to assess yourself where you are, look into the stakeholders that you work with most closely, which one they are they more on the business side of things, executive side of things, are they focusing on the risk and reward, are they focusing on the processes a little better, just to be able to formulate that common language. And yeah, like I said before, I have a cheat sheet that can stay with you weeks and months after this conversation, and I'm more than happy to share that with you. And that's it. We have, I think, about 10 minutes to be able to maybe address any questions and share any remarks if there is anything anyone wants to discuss.
Can you see the live chat, Mel, or
Um, I
should we
can
go to
see
the?
it now, but I don't know
Okay,
if there is anyone. I see that
maybe.
people came from London and Zurich, Amsterdam.
Okay,
So amazing. But maybe
maybe I
you can
can
add
share
more.
on screen
Yes.
Francesca's friction. It gives you a bit of it.
Okay, may I read it? I think we have plenty of time, so we don't have to rush. Hi,
Of
Francisca.
course.
Nice to meet you. You say, my biggest friction, they tend to have a lot of attention on how the interface looks and way less attention to why it looks in a certain way, ending up having a beautiful crafted interface with almost zero value for the users. It's so annoying. In your description, what I'm hearing you say is UX is reduced to UI, that your work is, and do write in chat if my interpretation is doing justice to what you mean to say, but it's a situation where a lot of my clients also go through that, in that they are from the stakeholders perspective to make things pretty, and by the time they get to work on the UI, a lot of the solutions, why they are there, and what purpose they need to cover, it's there. It's extremely frustrating, but we also need to be honest. It says something about the organization. It says something about the trust that you built so far with your stakeholders. It does sound like maybe there's a little more work that you can do to show them, not just tell, but to show that your interests and capabilities to serve, to collaborate lies not just in that UI part, which is important, but in the UX part as well. So the question from coaching perspective, Francisca, would be, what are some of the ways you can be in the problem space with them? This is way before we pick the colors. This is way before we look into look and feel of how the interface looks like, but more to do with what are we solving for, how can we address the business need with the problems that the users are challenged with, how do we frame the challenge, what is the scope of that, a lot before things become tangible. So what are the ways you can gain the trust and start using the language for them? So that would be my beginning question, and happy to delve into that if you like.
We have one from Lucia. I'm not sure the right pronunciation.
Okay.
On screen.
Sometimes the requests are driven. Oh, it's gone. It's gone. I can read it here. Sometimes the requests are driven by clients' feature requests, but I feel that they take it too much to the word without digging down to the main root or problem that is causing the request. Our Meltem pictures covering some bits of the slides. Oh, yes, we practice that. We use the smaller version, Lucia, but DM me on LinkedIn if there's anything that like we can discuss maybe more in person. But you say, I suppose because you use the word client, it's more in the consultancy setup. And it also speaks to the power dynamic that your organization might have with their clients, right? It We need some degree of equality to be able to brainstorm together, deep dive, and co-create what not just what the solution is going to be like, but what's the understanding of the problem that we have. So it is something that I also faced, and this is the part where it's probably worth, from where you're sitting, to understand the management's concerns and priorities of your organization first, because you represent them, and what success looks like for your role needs to be aligned with what your organization seeks. And then from that point try to make in small iterations how the changes in the interactions with the clients might be, because normally what I see happening is that we move towards change, like, you know, we want a different dynamic with the clients and so on, but first understand, like, why is the dynamic the way it is, what is your organization optimizing for, what are the challenges they're facing, and from that point, like, what's one change you can do in the way that you set up the kickoff meetings with your clients, for example, to get more than just, you know, word by word what the challenge might be. So this is some of the ways that we can approach this challenge with curiosity and move towards that.
I think we have a question also from Alan.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry for the bad pronunciation. It's on
Same
screen
for
now, and
me.
then you can read it in the chat.
Thank you. No, same if the pronunciation. I love that we're so international, and do correct us, please, if that's not accurate. How do you handle leaders or clients forcing their vision or how they want to approach it? Based on what Francisca said, I understand that a lot of people always want to skip the, to me, essential steps. I will say something that might feel horrible to you, but I think there is something quite liberating on that as well. When I started my UX career over a decade or more ago, I really approached it almost academically. I'm like, sure, there's a hierarchy in any organization because we need to have a reporting structure, right? We cannot all be CEOs, we cannot all be the UX researchers, whatever. But I figured that all opinions mattered equally because here the challenge in the organization was to pick the best idea, to formulate the best vision, and from an intern to the most senior executive, we all have a say in that. Well, I'm here to tell you this is not true. Maybe there is some organizations that, you know, there are some practices to make it happen, but what you're describing, Alan, is quite true because these leaders, they hire you to enable their vision most of the time. So your scope is really about figuring out how best can we implement that vision because you're hired for that, and not necessarily to discuss that vision if you yourself haven't perceived that there is that openness by that leader to reformulate that vision bit. This is my view after everything that is said and done, because one primary principle that also guides my coaching related to this question or comment is also that, like, hey, figure out, Ellen, or everyone else in this room, what's within your control and what's not within your control. It's not within your control who that leader is or why the client is who they are. It's not really within your control the vision they set. So that's it. You can choose to leave, of course, that's within your control. But the other thing that is within your control, and I propose, is if this is the basics of this vision, what are some of the ways within the scope that I cover I can learn, I can grow, I can challenge, I can experiment, and do a good job in a way that makes sense to me and the people I work with and my external clients and so on, so that I can get a bigger scope. And the more, you know, scope you get, then you are getting closer and closer to that space where the vision is being set. But until then, it's a little bit important to make sense of how to navigate that vision and not always to challenge it. It was a hard lesson for me, yeah. Thank you, Alan. It gave me too. It was like it was a process for me because I was like, why? Like this is so ridiculous. But yeah, um, so nice. Dale, is there anything else
Awesome.
we can answer?
Um, I don't think so. Also, we have like 1 minute left. So I suppose any other questions? Like actually, there's one here, another friction from Lucia. But maybe I could send it to you, Mel, and maybe you could, because I think Lucia is in the Gather Town conference platform. So
Okay.
maybe
Well,
you could find Lucia, or Lucia could find you.
Lucia can
And
find me. Lucia, find me. I'm happy to share with you or anyone else in the room if you can just DM me on LinkedIn to pass you my cheat sheet. I haven't seen your faces, but just let me tell you how happy I am that we got to answer these questions, share a little bit of my coaching or UXer experience, and I hope it was helpful. This is all I'm going to ask. So thank you so much for sharing these half an hour with me. Thank you,
Yes,
Francisco, Ellen, everyone.
thank you, everybody. We're going to close this session now to open up the next one. So thank you to everyone, and thank you also to Mel. It was a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Bye bye.